Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this evening session. I'm really excited to get started. In the meantime, I'm just going to introduce myself before I allow our special guest to join. My name is Hayley Malan, and I'm a parenting blogger over at Hayley's Joys. So over there, I share all my ups and downs about this parenthood journey. And one of the topics that I'm sure every parent is very interested in is about saving for your child's education, and that's the topic tonight. So I'm going to quickly get our special guest onto this live. So I've sent through the request. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this evening. Hi, Priya.
Hi, Hayley. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And yourself?
Good, thank you. Great to be here.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining. So with me tonight, I have Priya Naicker, and she's from Old Mutual. She's the head of strategic marketing at Old Mutual, and her passion is basically to help South Africans manage their finances and help their families achieve all their goals. And one of those goals is obviously education, because education is so important. Am I right, Priya?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ask any parent.
Yes, that's for sure. So yeah, I know it's bedtime for the kids, all the people who are watching, or almost bedtime. So I'm going to start ahead with the questions, if that's okay, Priya.
Absolutely. Ready to go.
Let's go. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the most important question. Why is it so important for us to save for our children's education?
So I think that's a big question. And as I said, ask any parent. And when you ask any parent what the most important thing is for them to save for in relation to their kids, they would usually say, save for education. And I think it's important to sort of question ourselves on that and to ask, why is it important to save for education? And usually when we ask that question of ourselves or of other parents, there's a variety of answers, but they all point towards possibility. So typically you'd have parents who talk about wanting to have create a bright future for their kids, wanting to have them best prepared. And it all boils down to wanting to give your children every possible chance to achieve the things that they would like to achieve at that point in their lives, and preparing them to be their best possible selves. Now, what I think is interesting is that if you look at some of the trajectories that we're facing as a society at the moment, you've got the fourth industrial revolution. So that speaks to the technology curve and the exponential role that technology is playing in our lives. You've got globalization, and you've got a number of experts saying to us that it's not clear that the current occupations that you can study for will even exist in the future. So then you start asking yourself as a parent, well, how important is it that I save for education? What type of education? What type of studies should my child be pursuing? What type of occupation will they pursue in the future? If you look at globalization, as I said, that raises the question of, is it really important to have just an occupation-based type of education, or is it important to have a multicultural understanding in the future? So those are all really big questions, but what they boil down to is that whilst we're not sure as parents in the next 10, 15, 20 years what the occupational landscape will look like, what our children will choose to pursue, we do know that we want to set them up for the best possible avenue and to be able to take advantage of opportunities. So in a nutshell, that's why it's important to save.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, they say knowledge is power, and once you have an education, nobody can take it away from you, no matter what you choose to do. There's always something that you will hold and you will remember. So with that in mind, Priya, what are the kind of educational policies out there, or products? I mean, there's a landscape of financial products if you search the internet or walk into a bank. But what is the landscape for educational saving today?
So I think we're in a really privileged position in South Africa in that our financial services landscape is quite advanced compared to many of our neighboring states and even some, countries outside of our continent. And the advantage of that is that you have a range of financial products that can be tailored to your needs as a parent. So I'm going to give you some examples. What you're typically referring to, Hayley, as an education policy is generally a policy, a savings plan or an investment policy that is packaged to allow parents to dedicate that savings towards education, but also has an element of committed savings. So if you're someone that battles with, staying committed to your savings plan, it then forces loyalty to that plan and forces a level of commitment, because there are penalties if you choose to withdraw. So if you find that you want to have the discipline and you need some help along that with that discipline, a typical education policy will help you do that. Some of the other benefits in an education plan is that you can have benefits attached to the plan that allow the investment to continue even if the parent meets with an event like a death or a disability. And what it does is ensure that you don't lose your savings and you don't lose the ability to contribute towards your child's education. But there are also other methods. So there are also ways in which you can structure more flexible plans. If you work with a financial advisor, you're able to then have a look at if you want a portion of that to be flexible so that you can withdraw during your child's schooling life or additional extracurricular activities. Let's say, for example, your child is chosen for a particular sport that requires overseas travel, things like that. You're able to draw some of that money and have a portion of it committed. So we're quite fortunate in that we have a range of products, very much about, in terms of how that's structured, will depend on your needs as a parent and what you're wanting to save for, how you're wanting to save, and that can be structured accordingly.
Okay, that's brilliant. So when exactly would be the best time to take out such an plan? I mean, is it when the child is born, or is it sometime along the child's schooling career?
So I think everybody who's watching has probably heard this quite a lot because it's the number one rule when it comes to money. There is very little you can do that will make up for time in the market. So the earlier you can start on any goal or any investment, the better. You usually need to compensate quite a bit if you allow the years to go by. There's a lovely proverb that I really enjoy that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So if you have kids, ideally you want to start when they're born. If not, if that wasn't possible, I mean, it isn't always possible, it is imperative that you start immediately. It's not always important that you start big, but it is important that you start as soon as possible. I love the story of a friend of mine who actually doesn't have kids, but for a number of years thought he was going to have kids, and began saving well before they were born. Not a lose-lose situation, because it's clearly a win, because although he opted later on not to have children, he's got the investment. So I might even take it a step further and say, if you are planning to have children, if you're planning to get married, to start a family, think of how you start putting a little bit of money away towards those goals.
That's interesting. It reminds me of when I was trying to get my little one into a few, nursery schools when we were looking. And one of the schools actually said that some parents actually come with a scan to say, this is my child, and they put down a deposit already to hold that place in their school of choice. So I think planning does go a long way, for especially when it comes to our kids.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a few years ago, I would have thought that's extreme, but I completely understand. Yeah.
That's so true. That's so true. So speaking of an educational policy, of course, I'm sure it covers things like the tuition fees and perhaps textbooks and uniforms, for example. What all would it actually cover?
So an education plan or any type of investment aimed at saving for education can cover as little or as much as you need it to. And so I want to revisit that thought we had just now around possibilities. So I think it's quite important to firstly assess your intent as a parent and what type of possibilities you want to create, and assess what level of savings you need to cover. So you have some parents who say, I am covering my child's schooling through their schooling years through my, my general salary. It's a normal expense. But when it comes to tertiary education, I'm not sure if they want to study abroad. They may want to take a gap year. I met someone who said, I want to make sure my child is able to study up to master's level without needing to take out loans or look elsewhere. And her child is, by the way, a year old, so it's really forward thinking. But based on what you want to cover, you can then start allocating or just having a look at how much you need to save and then allocating that towards your savings plan. Now, what I do think is important here is I mentioned possibilities. And like
Yes.
any of us, when we start talking possibilities, especially around our kids and things that get us excited, we can go a little bit off the wall. So possibilities can start becoming endless. And what can sometimes happen is you can become disheartened if you start looking at a range of possibilities and then you realize that it isn't possible from your monthly savings or your salary to be able to allocate that saving. So a nice sense check that I usually share with parents is think in terms of possibilities to understand what you're trying to save for, but then look at a baseline. Decide on what the minimum is that you want to provide for your kids. So the absolute minimum that you say, I have to have this in place to make sure that their education is secure. And once you've done that, it gives you a good range in which to play in, because you know that the minimum is what you need to do. And then anything beyond that is optional and extra. And when you have extra money coming from a bonus or your tax refund, you can, plow that into your savings. And so it's a way of being realistic, but also being open to those big possibilities.
Okay. So exactly how you've explained that now, when one has extra money or you obviously everybody works with a budget each and every month. So education is definitely something you want to save for, but also there's other things that families or parents would have goals for example, for their retirement, for a family vacation, or whatever the case may be. So where in the line of expenses or saving goals, where would you think education should technically fit in somebody's financial plan?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I'm going to start by sharing that one of the number one traps that we find parents falling into is they tend to save for education or prioritize education over other things that are equally, if not more important, and that creates some risk. So I'll give you some examples. If I said to a parent right now, what is most important for your child? Most times we will hear parents saying education. But if I start contrasting that and saying, what's more important, education or your child's health? Now it's a little bit more complex, and you're likely to say your child's health. If I say what's more important, education or your child's food, ability to eat, again, you're likely to choose food.
Yes.
And so it's easy to look at me and then go, well, isn't that being a little bit dramatic? Why would I want to choose between food or health and education? But the reality is, if parents don't secure their own life in terms of life insurance and disability insurance, that's exactly what you're doing. So you could save towards your child's education, but because you are their financial lifeline, if you lose the ability to provide for them, either because you're not here, because you've passed on, or if you've lost your ability to earn income, typically through a disability, you've compromised their ability to eat, their health, their clothing and basic necessities. So the first thing I say to parents is, you are your child's lifeline, financially, emotionally, and many other ways. But the least you can do, at least you have control over the financial lifeline element. So the first thing to do is make sure that you prioritize your own risk, your own protection. You know, you've covered yourself. Then look at things like saving towards holidays and other goals. But those naturally would come further down the order, and education for your children usually comes up higher. What I will also say is that along with protecting yourself as a parent, as your child's lifeline, it is also really important that you protect your own retirement, because in doing so, you protect your children. I think most of us are familiar in South Africa with the concept of a sandwich generation, meaning that we have a generation of people, many of us probably watching today as well, support our own families and children, but also need to fund some of our parents' or extended families' retirement because they haven't saved enough. So if you think you're being a good parent by channeling all your money into your child's education, you're actually not, because it's going to come back to bite them at some stage if you don't cater for your own retirement. So balance those needs, and then by all means, save for the holiday. I think we all need it.
Yes. That's so true. Thanks, Priya. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's pointless if you're sending your child to a good school, but you can't put food on the table. So it just, you need to obviously understand what works best for your family at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So tell me, so what if I, for example, take out a policy for my daughter now, and we reach her tertiary education, and that's what our ultimate goal was for. And she tells me she doesn't actually want to study anything just yet. So then what would happen to that money that I've invested?
Yeah, great question. So I think the beauty of that is that money, the investment that you would have set aside and the growth you would have earned is available to you. And you then as a parent have the option of deciding, you know, what you'd like to spend that on, and you could incentivize your child on other things. So it may be that your daughter decides, I actually don't want to study any further, but I want to travel the world and work at different, you know, volunteer in different ways, and the type of education she'll be getting is equally valuable, but really different from formal education. So I'm a really big believer that there isn't a single path to education, and that a multidisciplinary type of education is going to be more of a differentiator in the future. So having an investment plan that then allows you to receive those funds and decide how you want to apply it at that time is quite valuable. And you absolutely have that. I think, as I said, we're in quite a sophisticated financial services landscape in South Africa. So if you saved in an investment policy, you absolutely have access to those funds. And there's never a harm in having too much money. So.
Okay, so then the same would apply, for example, if she were to do a couple of months and then drop out, and there's additional money in the policy still available to me as I've saved.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Because of that flexibility that the policy allows for.
Absolutely. It is your money. So you don't forfeit the money if your child decides not to pursue a formal education track, or to do a few different things. It is your money, and you don't forfeit that. It will be available to you.
Okay. That's very good to know, because I think that's probably one of the thoughts parents would actually consider before they take out a policy, to think, what if they do this policy and then it actually doesn't get used because the child is not keen to actually study. But that's great. I'm really glad to hear that there is some flexibility in that. So how would I go about it if I were to, want to take out a policy for my child? What would be my first step?
I think it's quite important to meet with a financial advisor. Many people feel that a financial advisor is only for the wealthy, and I'm here to tell you that that's absolutely not true. So you'll typically have access to a range of financial advisors. If anybody out there is looking for one, you're welcome to go to Old Mutual. And if you type in on the website, find an advisor inside the Old Mutual website, you can select one, or you can opt to be called back and have an advisor allocated to you. But generally in the SA landscape, we have a range of very qualified advisors and a very professional landscape, especially over the last 20 to 30 years. So your advisor has to be accredited, has to be licensed, and so generally you're in good hands. It's important to build a good relationship with an advisor, because some of the things I shared today around possibilities, around how you protect yourself, those are intimate conversations that most likely as a parent you haven't sat down and thought of specifically. So we typically think of an education plan, but have we thought of what type of possibilities we want to enable? What type of parenting values do we want to instill? So some parents would, as I said earlier, would want to fund absolutely everything. Others would say, it's important to me that my child learns the value of work, so I will fund their basic fees, but any entertainment and extracurricular university activities they need to work and support. So those kind of very intimate conversations come, they're based on your parental values, the way you see yourself raising your family. And you need to have a relationship with someone who you feel comfortable talking to about those things, and who will then be a partner to you. Because it is important that as you start on this track and you decide, you share those plans, you create a plan, your advisor will help you structure a flexible solution or a committed plan, as we talked about, perhaps a combination of both, and then will also, or should be there with you through the journey when things change. So, often we have people who have left the corporate track and gone into an entrepreneurial sort of route, or have side hustles. And it's important to then say, okay, what does this do for my savings plan? Are we still on track? Do we need to divert savings elsewhere? How do we balance priorities? So the first thing for me is get in touch with a financial advisor. If for any reason you feel uncomfortable to do so, or you feel like it's not something you want to do right now, you absolutely can purchase products online. So you can go online, you can ask to purchase online, or you can purchase telephonically. And if you're clear on what you want and you want to get started, you absolutely can do that as well.
Okay, but that makes absolute sense about getting a financial advisor, for me at least, because like we spoke about earlier, you need to prioritize your different goals and savings and expenses. It's sometimes difficult to make sense in my own head what's more important than this. So I think a financial advisor would be more equipped to actually guide me along that process. It just makes complete sense to me. So,
absolutely.
Priya, my
And
next
often
question...
it is...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that often it is very helpful even just to have a third party asking you questions. Because when you have to articulate, especially things that you often think are obvious, but when you have to start thinking of articulating your goals and where you want to take your family, and the type of life you want to build for your family, it starts to crystallize what your beliefs and what your plans are, and make it very obvious what the path forward is.
Absolutely, and I'm sure they would be there to, motivate you to save more, because yes, it's trying times where it's difficult to save these days, but I think we all need a reminder to save a little bit more. I can sometimes kick myself, if I could have started saving younger. And as you get older, your road to retirement just gets shorter and shorter. So, yeah, I would definitely seek professional guidance in that regard, instead of just, going on my own mission as I do. So we've asked the followers for if they had any questions, and we got a few. And somebody asked the question to say that they've actually got an educational policy for their child. When is the ideal time to actually let it pay out?
So with all investments, the longer you stay invested, the better chance you have for growth and higher returns. So if it is not something that you need right now, my suggestion would be to allow it to continue growing. And so the best time is actually to withdraw that when you need it to apply it to the goal. So if you were saving for your child's university education, it would be great if you could get to university age and then withdraw it. And if you don't need it at that point, then absolutely allow it to grow a little bit further, and pull out pieces when you need it. So the longer you can leave it invested, the better it will bode for you.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you're saying that there is that flexibility should you need it, for example, for high school fees, or, something up to that point, leading to university. So it's good to know that there is flexibility.
Yeah, I'll just add that, remember we spoke about a committed plan. So there are some types of policies where there's flexibility, but there will be penalties if you withdraw early. And that's built in to try to, when you need help, to stay disciplined and stay the course. And if that's the type of plan you have, very important that you try to stay invested in that plan as long as possible until the goal date. But that is why it's also important to maybe spend some time with an advisor when you are building up your plan, because absolutely, if you require some flexibility, you're able to build that in. But if you're already invested in something and there's an urgent need for the money, absolutely, it is your money and you are able to access it.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't have any more questions, but I'm actually going to just check because I've seen some comments and some questions coming through. So if you don't mind, Priya, I'm just going to ask you, let's just see what there was. Is there a name to the plan where one can Google to search for educational policy with Old Mutual?
So I would go onto, if you can go onto Old Mutual and just / Old Mutual Education, or even just Google search Old Mutual Education. What that will do is take you to the page on the site that talks about the education need and gives you a picture of the different type of savings vehicles you have. So instead of it just plugging in one, just as I said, it allows you to look at the different options, all of which you can sort of tailor make and modularize. So you can, like building blocks, think of it like that. If you need a part that's flexible and a part that's committed and a part that has benefits that pays out, continues to pay the plan, even if you pass on or become disabled, it pulls all of those options together and surfaces it for you. If you'd like to proceed, it'll then give you some paths that you can go down, whether you'd like to go purchase telephonically or you actually want to sit down with an advisor. So Old Mutual Education.
Okay. So just for everybody's benefit, at the end of the session, I'm going to save this video on the Mama Magic SA page. And there will be information as to how to get in touch with the financial advisor should you wish to explore the option of an educational policy. So we'll leave all the details in there if anybody wants to get further information. Okay, we've actually got the link also that's been tagged in here as well. There's a comment: awesome exposure to the community. Creating awareness about saving for your child's future education is crucial to ensure that South Africa's future is bright. I've seen my parents' investment materialize. Oh, that's beautiful, and that's so true. Am I right, Priya? That's just exactly why you do what you do.
Absolutely. And I think for any of us that have had the benefit, of our parents saving for education, or been the beneficiary of that, you're under no doubt about wanting to pass that on to your children. Again, even if it's just the possibilities that you want to unlock for them. So I agree with that completely. I think that's a beautiful circle to see that, coming full circle.
That is. Thank you so much for the comment, Ahmed. And we've got Old Mutual is the best advisor. Education is solid. And then there's a question, can we have temporary educational policies, say for preschool, instead of dipping into the long-term educational policy? That's a good question.
Yes, so you can structure investment policies that allow you to, that are quite flexible and allow you to dip into that money whenever you need it. So absolutely, if your child is very young and you'd like to save for a few years, knowing that you want to dip into it when your child is in preschool, or through their primary school years, the plans are available. You can structure accordingly. It certainly is doable.
Okay, or you could perhaps have separate ones, maybe for preschool, for high school, or tertiary.
Yes.
I think there's lots of flexibility and lots of choices.
Yes, so you're reminding me of a friend of mine who, because you could structure a single plan, or the way you structure your solutions to cater for both shorter term, medium, and long term. But I do have a friend who has separate plans for each of those stages, and says it's just much easier to know which one is for which, and it's just neat and tidy. So yes, that's an option.
Yeah, or if you have two children that's at different life stages, I think it would just simplify things when you reach those stages.
That's a great example, yes.
Thanks, Priya. And then I don't see any other questions. Clifford says, please save the video. I came in late. We will be saving the video for your reference. As soon as this video ends, I'm going to save it on the Mama Magic page, and there'll be information that you can also get in touch with Old Mutual should you wish to request any further information. I'll gladly do that. Priya, I don't have any other questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add or to share with the listeners this evening?
I think just to maybe recap, the first thing is education, saving. We see this all the time. Our parent community is quite aware of the importance and very, very focused on saving for education. So I want to recap that I think it's important to have a conversation around the possibilities that you want to save for. Remember to bake in a minimum standard, so you know that you're at least achieving a certain standard and a certain level that you want to get to for your kids. And then anything else is, is flexible, and you can plow in some of your additional tax refunds or bonuses into that. I think the second part was, I am always at every opportunity sharing with parents that you should never ignore your protection needs. So make sure you've protected yourself against death and disability if you have young children, because you are their lifeline. So make sure you've protected yourself. And the final thought is, please make sure you take care of your retirement savings for yourself, or else you will trap your kids in a perpetual cycle where they need to take care of you when they're older and possibly have their own kids. So those are my top takeaways.
Thank you so much, Priya. It's very insightful, and you're making me think to really look at everything and plan ahead. Like you said, you can never start too soon. I think there's benefits, and like you said, you can build in that flexibility that even if your child doesn't end up studying the doctorate you want them to do in 20 years' time, that will never go to waste. There would always be a legitimate reason and something worthwhile for them to do. I see we're getting a few more questions popping up here. So if you don't mind, Priya, I'm sorry. I think it's
No,
such an
that's
important
fine.
topic. Everybody wants to get your views. Okay, Lesica wants to know, is the educational policy only for the child, or can it also be for a parent? As a young mom, I'd like to increase my chances of employment by furthering my education. So can I also benefit from it?
Yeah, great question. So I think this fits in slightly separately from an education policy, because typically education policies are meant for children, and baking in your savings for your kids. But as we spoke about earlier, there are other goals that fall outside of that. So some of those might be saving for a holiday and all of those things. But I'm seeing so much of this, which I love, where you have parents or young adults saying, actually, I know in the next few years I want to further my studies. So you may want to pursue a qualification or further qualifications. But also, we're finding many parents saying, I want to further my studies and I also want to maybe take a year off or a sabbatical. Or I want to further my studies full time and not part time, which means I have to plan for not having an income in that time. And those are exciting goals to have. So you absolutely can save for that in an investment plan. And again, you can choose to structure that plan. If your goal is 5 years from now, you could have a 5-year term. You could have a flexible plan that allows you to put in more money when you have additional money, especially if you're self-employed. You have those periods where you earn much more than expected, and you can put some of that money away. So definitely look at how you structure those goals and how you save towards your own studies if you so wish. And I will just say to our viewer who asked the question, that he or she is not alone. You are in good company. There are many people taking their personal development very seriously, and what better example for your kids as well.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I think that was a great question to end of our session this evening. I think the bottom line for me is education is never wasted. Knowledge is power. And I think by giving our kids the opportunity to further their education, no matter what they end up doing, will definitely be to their benefit. So, Priya, I would like to thank you so much for taking the time out this evening. And thank you to everybody who joined us. I'm going to share information on the Mama Magic page with this video, and also how you can get in touch with Old Mutual should you wish to explore the option of educational policies. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Priya.
Thanks, Hayley, and thank you, everyone.
Somebody's already asking when's the next session, so I take it this was very helpful.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.